Hi, I'm Rev Myron. I'm a minister through Pathways of Light, and I've been a Course in Miracles student for over 40 years. I'm going to the text again this year, asking Jesus for clarity, and then I write from that clarity, and that's what I'm sharing with you today. So let's get started. We're on chapter 9, section 1, the acceptance of reality, and we're going to read paragraphs 5 and 6 today. So paragraph 5 says, I have emphasized many times that the Holy Spirit will never call upon you to sacrifice anything. But if you ask the sacrifice of reality of yourself, the Holy Spirit must remind you that this is not God's will because it is not yours. There is no difference between your will and God's. If you did not have a split mind, you would recognize that willing is salvation because it is communication. I'm going to consider the idea of willing as communication when I look at the next paragraph where Jesus says more about it. Right now, my mind is focused on the concept of sacrifice and the idea of my will and God's will being the same. I've always thought that God was asking me to sacrifice. This has been going on all my life. Sacrificing for God was strongly emphasized when I was a Catholic. Not that I needed any encouragement to believe in sacrifice, but through Catholicism, sacrifice became confused with the love of God in my mind. In reality, sacrifice is related not to the love of God, but to the fear of God. Slowly, through the study of A Course in Miracles, I've learned that God does not want my sacrifice. The idea of sacrifice is a sticky mess in my mind, though, and I still notice a belief cropping up. So although it is still there, it is no longer strongly believed and it's denied as truth when I see it. If God wanted my sacrifice, he would not be love. For a long time, one belief confused me. And here's my confusion. It was a belief that the Holy Spirit wanted me to sacrifice a world and my own self in order to be saved. Indeed, he encourages me to give up the world and the ego self, but he also teaches me there is no sacrifice in doing so. And up until now, I wasn't buying it. There was still this corner of my mind where insanity reigned, and I thought it was better to rule the asylum than to be one with God. Well, it is still there, but it's shrinking in space, nearly gone. In this dark corner of my mind, the ego insists that with just a little more time, the world can be improved upon and I will finally get what I want. It's been saying this for eons. Never mind that it can't articulate precisely what I want or how that task will be accomplished. The ego mind is insistent that giving up on the separation idea is a loss. As a concept, I've already given up on the separation idea. Now I'm just looking at the many forms of this idea in my mind and life, shining light into that dark corner. I've learned through contrast that it is no sacrifice to let it all go. I do this a thought at a time, a situation at a time, a relationship at a time. The lesson is being generalized, and I'm much closer to letting go of the idea that I'm ever being asked to sacrifice. I have finally realized there is nothing here worth keeping. So how could it be that letting it go would be a sacrifice? This naturally leads me to the next idea. God's will is my will. We share the same will, God and me. This separate ego will is a toy I played with, not what I am. I am one with God, and so I am one with his will. That's the only will I have. And as I let go of the belief I'm being asked to sacrifice my own will for God's, I become more eager for the truth. I become less protective of the ego will and more willing to accept my own true will. Now the idea of my will being overcome by God's will no longer frightens me because I realize this is not what's happening. I am instead simply returning to my own will, which is returning to God's will. I'm still allowing this to be untangled in my mind, but it will go faster now that I'm no longer afraid of it. So paragraph 6 says, it is impossible to communicate in alien tongues. You and your creator can communicate through creation because that and only that is your joint will. A divided mind cannot communicate because it speaks for different things to the same mind. This loses the ability to communicate simply because confused communication does not mean anything. A message cannot be communicated unless it makes sense. How sensible can your messages be when you ask for what you do not want? Yet, as long as you're afraid of your will, that is precisely what you're asking for. So my creator doesn't speak English, by the way. He doesn't speak words at all. We cannot communicate in that way. We communicate through creation only. I have to admit that I don't know how I do this, but I know that I must, because in another place in the Course, it says that we communicate directly with God. It must be heart to heart. My truest desires and my truest love are received by God without the interference of inadequate words and concepts, and without the confusion I suffer when I try to communicate through my ego mind. Do I ask for what I do not want? All the time. I've become more aware of this conflicted asking since I began practicing lesson 325. It says that everything I see is a reflection of a process in my mind that starts with a desire, becomes an image in my mind, and is then projected outward so I can look at it, believe it, and defend it. So I notice the situations in my life that are upsetting in some way. I ask myself what I desire. What I'm discovering is I desired something and made an image of it, and in my experience of that image, I often suffer. For instance, I had some physical discomfort this week. I asked the Holy Spirit to show me the desire that caused this image to be made, and I saw that I wanted to suffer physical pain. All this healing of the mind is challenging to the ego, and physical pain has been effective in the past as a deterrent to the idea that I'm not a body. It's also a significant distraction and keeps the mind focused on the story rather than the cause of the story. So I can see why I desired pain. There can be other reasons too, but the issue right now is that I desire pain. And when I get the pain, I don't want it. Like Jesus said, I ask for what I don't want. I don't want the pain I ask for because then I would have an unpleasant experience. But it's more than that. I don't want it because it teaches me that I'm something I'm not. This is confused communication, and so it is not really communication. What I truly want is to remember what I am. I'm certainly not the frail, sickly body I asked for. Noticing this process, becoming aware of and accepting that I did indeed choose to experience pain, is helping me to take full responsibility for the world I made. Now seen in the light, it can be healed. I could have taken medicine this weekend, but fixing the image I made isn't really fixing the problem, and trying to think differently doesn't work. What I did instead is to realize that the desire to be in pain is what needs healing. Once I see that, I can ask the Holy Spirit to remove that from my mind. I see the problem thoughts. I realize I no longer want them, and I ask for healing. That's all I have to do. The Holy Spirit does the rest. These insane thoughts are making an insane world. The way to correct this is to allow the Holy Spirit to heal the mind. When there are no more insane thoughts in the mind, communication will no longer be confused. All desire will come from the love that we are. Then the images we make will be the real world, that is, the happy dream that Jesus talks about. From that place, we will be lifted up by our Creator and all else will disappear. This weekend, it looked like I just wanted to be pain-free, but what I really wanted was a healed mind. I wasn't just asking to feel better. I was asking to return the mind to its natural state, to be free of all conflict, and to return my awareness to true creation, and thus to full communication with my Creator. Thank you so much for joining me in this reading. I hope that you found it helpful. If you did, then please like it. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe. And I'll be back soon with another reading. See you then.